I pressed my palm against the cold window of Harborview Medical Center, watching the Seattle rain blur the city lights below. Each droplet felt like another dollar slipping through my fingers, another moment I was failing my son. At 63 years old, I thought I'd seen the worst life could throw at me. I was wrong. Mom. The word was barely a whisper. I turned from the window to see Jake lying there, tubes and wires connecting him to machines that beeped in rhythm with my breaking heart. My 32-year-old son, a photographer who'd traveled the world capturing beauty, now trapped in his own body after a motorcycle accident on the I-5. The doctors said experimental brain surgery in Switzerland could bring him back. Without it, he had maybe 3 months before the swelling caused irreversible damage. The cost was $285,000. I had $14,000 in my retirement account. "I'm here, sweetheart." I took his hand, careful not to disturb the IV. His girlfriend Emma had been here earlier, crying so hard she couldn't speak. They were supposed to get engaged next month. Now she didn't know if she'd ever hear him say her name again. Mrs. Walsh. Dr. Patel appeared in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. "We need to discuss the timeline." I already knew what she was going to say. I'd been a piano teacher for 40 years. I could read people the way I read music, by the silences between the notes. "How long?" I asked. "Without the surgery, 6 to 8 weeks. Maybe 10 if we're lucky." She paused. "I'm sorry. I know the fundraiser hasn't reached its goal." We'd raised $31,000 in 5 weeks. It was generous. It wasn't enough. I'd already sold my late husband's vintage guitar collection, my grandmother's jewelry, anything of value. My small house in Ballard was mortgaged to the ceiling. There was nothing left to give except the piano, and even that wouldn't get us close. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the bills I couldn't pay and the sun I couldn't save. The rain hammered against the windows like it was trying to get in, to drown me along with everything else. I was so tired of being strong, of pretending I had answers, of failing the people I loved most. The next morning, I dragged myself to the music conservatory where I still taught part-time. Mrs. Walsh, the receptionist, Jessica, met me at the door with an odd expression. "Someone left this for you." She handed me a heavy envelope, the kind made from expensive paper that whispered money when you touched it. Inside was a letter written in elegant script on cream stationery. "Mrs. Diana Walsh, I understand you are in urgent need of funds for your son's medical care. I have a proposition that may serve both our interests. Please meet me at the Kane Estate, 1847 Magnolia Boulevard West, tomorrow at 3 p.m. Come alone. This is a business matter. I assure you it is legitimate. Vincent Kane." My hands shook as I read it. Everyone in Seattle's classical music circles knew about Vincent Kane, reclusive composer, heir to the Kane fortune, living alone in that massive estate overlooking Puget Sound. I'd never met him, but I'd heard the stories. Some said he was a musical genius who'd lost his mind. Others claimed he was hiding from a scandal in Vienna. The most common rumor was that he was simply broken by grief after his young protégé died tragically years ago. "What does it say?" Jessica peered over my shoulder. "I think it's a scam." But my voice wavered. "That's his stationery. I've seen it before when the conservatory received his donations." She touched the paper. "Diana, what if it's real?" I spent that evening researching Vincent Kane. There wasn't much online. A few articles about his compositions from the 1,990 brilliant works that had won international acclaim. Photos from that era showed a handsome man in his 40s, always photographed from the shoulders up, always wearing high-collared shirts. Then nothing after 2003. He'd vanished from public life, retreating to the family estate. The next afternoon, I drove my old Subaru up the winding drive to the Kane estate. The house was stunning, a modern glass and stone structure that seemed to grow from the cliff edge, all clean lines and expensive taste. I almost turned back 3 times, but I kept seeing Jake's face, his eyes closed, and I kept driving. A man in his 50s answered the door, dressed formally. "Mrs. Walsh, I'm Philip, Mr. Kane's assistant. Please come in." The interior was breathtaking, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Sound, a grand piano in the center of the main room, art that belonged in museums. But despite the beauty, something felt hollow about the space, like a heart that had forgotten how to beat. Philip led me to a study lined with leather-bound music scores. "Mr. Kane will join you shortly. May I offer you tea?" "No, thank you." My voice came out steadier than I felt. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. I was reaching for my purse to leave when I heard footsteps. The man who entered was tall, perhaps 67 or 68, with silver hair swept back from a sharp, aristocratic face. He wore an expensive charcoal suit, and what struck me immediately was the silk scarf wrapped around his neck, burgundy and thick, despite the warmth of the room. "Mrs. Walsh, thank you for coming." He didn't offer his hand. "Please, sit." I sat on the edge of a leather chair. He remained standing, one hand absently touching the scarf at his throat. "I'll be direct," he said. His voice was cultured, musical even in speech. "I require a wife. You require $285,000. I'm proposing a marriage of convenience." The room spun slightly. "Excuse me?" "A legal marriage. 2-year term. You would reside here, accompany me to certain musical events and board meetings, and present as my wife to the outside world. In return, I will fund your son's surgery in full, plus provide you with $12,000 monthly. At the conclusion of our arrangement, we divorce amicably and you leave with an additional $75,000. "Why?" The word escaped before I could stop it. His jaw tightened. "My sister Carolyn is contesting my father's will. She claims I'm mentally unstable and unfit to control the Kane Music Foundation. If I can demonstrate that I'm leading a normal life, married, socially engaged, her case collapses. Once the legal matter is resolved, we can quietly end the marriage." "Why me?" "You're a music teacher with an impeccable reputation in the community. You're widowed, so there are no romantic complications. You're respected, which lends legitimacy to this arrangement. And most importantly, you're desperate enough to consider it." He met my eyes. "That's honest, not cruel." "It's both." But I couldn't argue with the truth. What would be expected of me? Your own bedroom suite. No physical relationship whatsoever. You'd need to attend foundation galas, host occasional dinners, be seen in public with me. You could visit your son daily. In fact, I'll arrange for him to be transferred to Swedish Medical Center here in Seattle after his surgery, so you can be close. Why not hire an actress? Because this must be legally binding. Carolyn's attorneys would dismantle anything fraudulent. He pulled out a card. "My attorney's contact. Call him with any questions about the contract. You have until tomorrow evening to decide." I drove home through the rain in a daze. That night, I sat with Emma at Jake's bedside. "Diana, I can't let you do this," Emma said after I told her everything. "It's too much." "You're not letting me do anything. I'm choosing. But marrying a stranger, what if he's dangerous?" "I've dealt with difficult men before," I lied. The truth was, I was terrified. But I was more terrified of watching Jake die. "Emma, there's no other way." We both knew it was true. The fundraiser had stalled. Emma was working double shifts as a graphic designer but barely covering her own rent. My teaching income was gone since I'd taken leave to be with Jake. I called the attorney the next morning. The contract was ironclad. 2-year marriage, duties specified, payment schedule detailed, confidentiality clauses, exit provisions. Everything was there in black and white. At 7 p.m., I called Vincent Kane's number. "Mr. Kane, this is Diana Walsh. I accept your proposal." 9 days later, I married Vincent Kane in a private ceremony at the estate, just Philip and Vincent's attorney as witnesses. I wore a simple navy dress. Vincent wore a dark suit and that scarf, always that scarf. We exchanged vows. He nodded when it was done. No kiss, no emotion, just a transaction completed. I moved in that evening. Philip showed me to a suite on the 2nd floor overlooking the water. Everything was beautiful and impersonal, like living in an expensive hotel. "Mr. Kane takes his meals at 7 a.m. and 6:30 p.m., Philip explained. "He spends most of his time in the music room on the 3rd floor. He prefers not to be disturbed unless necessary." "The scarf?" I started. "Does he always?" "That's not my place to discuss, Mrs. Walsh." His expression was kind but firm. The first week was surreal. Vincent and I barely spoke beyond pleasantries. We'd eat breakfast in silence, him reading scores, me checking my phone for updates about Jake. The surgery was scheduled for 2 weeks out, Swiss doctors already reviewing the case, Vincent's check having cleared the day after our wedding. At dinner, Vincent briefed me on the upcoming events. A foundation gala, a donors' dinner, a concert where his new composition would premiere. He spoke about them like military operations, strategies, and contingencies. "You'll need appropriate attire," he said one evening. "Philip will arrange for a stylist tomorrow. I have clothes. Not for these functions." He said it as pure fact. No judgment. "Send the invoices to my accountant." The stylist brought gowns, cocktail dresses, jewelry I'd never dreamed of wearing. The transformation felt wrong, like I was playing dress-up in someone else's life. The first gala terrified me. Vincent appeared at my suite in a tuxedo, the scarf replaced by a high formal collar and bow tie that still covered his throat completely. "Shall we?" He offered his arm. The ballroom at the Four Seasons was full of Seattle's elite, orchestra conductors, board members of arts organizations, philanthropists dripping with wealth. "Just stay close," Vincent murmured as we entered. "I'll manage most conversations." But people wanted to talk to me. Vincent Kane, married after decades alone? Everyone wanted to know about the woman who'd accomplished the impossible. I smiled, told them I'd been a piano teacher, that we'd met through mutual friends at the conservatory. Vincent stayed at my side, his hand occasionally at my back, in a gesture that looked intimate but felt rehearsed. "You did well," he said in the car afterward. "Thank you. The surgery went perfectly. Dr. Schmidt called this afternoon." I turned to him. "You spoke to Jake's surgeon?" "I'm funding his care. I like to stay informed." A pause. "Your son is strong, Diana. The doctors are optimistic." I hadn't expected him to care about details. This was just a contract, wasn't it? The second month, something shifted. I started spending evenings in the music room, reading while Vincent composed. He worked at the piano, lost in worlds of sound I could only glimpse. Sometimes he'd play for hours, music that was beautiful and desperately sad. "You studied piano," he observed one evening, seeing my fingers unconsciously following his melody. "For 40 years. I taught everyone from 5-year-olds to concert pianists. My husband used to say I could hear what people meant, not just what they said. Music is honest that way." He played a phrase, delicate and searching. "Words can lie. Music can't." He started leaving sheet music on my sitting room table. First editions, rare scores, composers I'd mentioned loving. I never saw him do it, but I knew. I also noticed other things. Vincent never removed that scarf, even in the privacy of the house. He turned away when changing the fabric from day to night versions, as if someone might see. And late at night, I'd hear music from above, the same haunting melody repeated endlessly, like he was trying to solve an equation that had no answer. "Philip," I asked one morning, "what happened to him?" He paused in arranging flowers. "I've worked for Mr. Kane for 15 years. In all that time, he's never told me, and I've never asked. But you know something. I suspect many things, Mrs. Walsh. But they're not my stories to share." The third month, Carolyn Kane made her move. She arrived unannounced on a Tuesday, pushing past Philip into the foyer where I was reviewing foundation budgets. "So you're the piano teacher he hired to play wife." Carolyn was elegant, cold, maybe 65. "Did he tell you about Vienna?" My stomach dropped, but I kept my expression neutral. "I think you should leave. 20 years ago, my brother was the most promising composer of his generation." She stepped closer. "Then his student, a brilliant young violinist named Anna, took her own life. She'd been struggling with the pressure Vincent put on her, the impossible standards. He destroyed her, and then he destroyed himself." "Get out." Vincent's voice came from the stairs, shaking with fury. "It's true, Vinny." Carolyn's smile was vicious. "You drove that girl to suicide and you've been hiding ever since. That's why you wear those ridiculous scarves, isn't it? To hide what you did to yourself? This marriage is a sham and I'll prove it. Once the court sees how unstable you are, I'll finally be able to sell that ridiculous foundation and this mausoleum. Philip, show my sister out." Vincent's voice was ice. After she left, Vincent stood frozen on the stairs. I waited for him to speak, to explain, to defend himself. Instead, He turned and walked back up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the agony in Vincent's eyes, the way Carolyn's words had struck him like physical blows. Around midnight, I heard a crash from the music room. I should have stayed in my suite. That was the arrangement, clear boundaries. But I'd been a teacher too long to ignore someone in pain. The door was partially open. Inside, Vincent sat at the piano bench, his head in his hands. Sheet music was scattered across the floor where he'd swept it away. And for the first time since I'd met him, the scarf was gone. I saw why he always wore it. A scar ran from just below his left ear down across his throat, disappearing beneath his collar. It was old, silvered with time, but unmistakable. A deliberate cut, deep and vicious. He tried to end his own voice, the instrument through which he created beauty. "Don't," he said without looking up. "Please don't look at me." I knelt beside him. "Let me help. I don't need your pity." "Good. I'm not offering it." I carefully gathered the scattered music. "But I am offering help. That's who I am." He finally met my eyes, and I saw tears. Her name was Anna Kovacs. She was 19, from Prague, the most talented violinist I'd ever taught. He voice cracked. She came to me at the conservatory in Vienna when I was there as composer in residence. I saw her potential, and I pushed her, harder and harder. I told myself it was for her own good, that greatness required sacrifice. His hands shook. She started missing rehearsals. Her playing became erratic. I called it laziness. I pushed harder. And then one morning, they found her. She'd overdosed on sleeping pills. Left a note saying she couldn't be what I needed her to be. That's not your fault. Complications of mental illness. She was 19. My voice. My responsibility. The fury in his eyes was directed inward. Her parents screamed at me at the funeral. They were right. I was so arrogant, Diana. I thought I was creating art. I was creating tragedy. So 6 months later, I took a knife and I tried to silence the voice that had destroyed her. Obviously, I failed at that too. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, and I've heard a lot of stupid things in 40 years of teaching. He stared at me. You made a terrible mistake. You pushed too hard. But you didn't kill Anna. Her illness did. And you've been punishing yourself for 20 years. I stood, holding out my hand. Get up. I can't. Yes, you can. Take my hand. He looked at my outstretched hand like it was something from another world. Then slowly, hesitantly, he reached up and took it. His grip was trembling but real. I pulled him to his feet. Tomorrow, we're calling a therapist. A proper one. And you're going to start dealing with this instead of hiding from it. Why do you care? Because I'm your wife, you impossible man. Even if it's just on paper. I met his eyes. And because everyone deserves a chance to heal, including you. Something changed between us that night. Vincent started therapy the following week. I drove him to appointments, sat with him through sessions that left him drained and raw. He stopped hiding the scarf from me, though he still wore it in public. We started having real conversations. He told me about Vienna, his love of composition, his guilt that had become identity. I told him about my late husband Tom, raising our son alone after cancer took him, my fear of failing Jake the way I'd failed to save Tom. Jake woke up, Vincent said one morning at breakfast, 3 weeks post-surgery. I nearly dropped my coffee. What? Dr. Schmidt called last night. Jake's conscious and asking for you. I burst into tears right there. Vincent crossed to where I sat, and for the first time, he pulled me into an awkward but genuine embrace. Thank you, I whispered against his shoulder. Thank you for saving him. You saved me first, he said quietly. I didn't know I could still be saved. But Carolyn wasn't finished. She filed for conservatorship, claiming Vincent was mentally incompetent. Private investigators had interviewed people at the conservatory, former colleagues in Vienna. She painted a picture of a man who'd never recovered from trauma, who'd married a stranger in a desperate attempt to appear normal. The court date was set for month 16 of our marriage. Vincent stopped sleeping. The progress from therapy seemed to evaporate overnight. He'd pace the music room until dawn, playing the same mournful melody over and over. What if she wins? He asked one night over tea in the study. We'd fallen into this routine, evenings talking instead of silence. What if I lose the foundation? Then we fight harder, Diana, you don't understand. If she gets control, she'll liquidate everything. All the scholarships for young musicians, the grants for composers, the programs my father built. She'll destroy it all for money. Then we prove her wrong. We prove you're exactly who you are, someone who's healing. The hearing was brutal. Carolyn's lawyers presented Vincent as a recluse with a history of self-harm who'd paid a desperate woman to pretend to be his wife. They brought forward people who'd never seen us show affection, who described Vincent as damaged and unstable. Then our turn came. Philip testified about how Vincent had changed, engaging with the foundation, attending therapy, seeming present in ways he hadn't been in years. The foundation director testified about Vincent's clear decision-making, his vision for expanding their programs. Dr. Schmidt testified via video about Vincent's involvement in Jake's care, his rational questions and support. Finally, I took the stand. Mrs. Walsh, Carolyn's attorney asked, "Is your marriage to Vincent Kane genuine?" I looked at Vincent sitting there, the scarf around his throat hiding his deepest shame, his gray eyes fixed on mine. "Yes," I said, "it's genuine. But you married him for money, correct? To pay for your son's surgery." I entered into an arrangement with Vincent. "That's true. But what we have now isn't an arrangement. It's a marriage. Can you prove that? Prove love? I don't need to prove love to you." I turned to the judge. "Vincent Kane is one of the most brilliant, compassionate men I've ever known. He saved my son's life without hesitation. He's funded music education for hundreds of students. He's donated millions to mental health research. Yes, he struggles with guilt from his past. That doesn't make him incompetent. That makes him human. And he's doing the work to heal. That takes more courage than hiding from pain ever did." The judge ruled in Vincent's favor. Carolyn's petition was denied. She stormed out threatening appeals that her own lawyer quietly told her had no merit. That night, back at the estate, Vincent and I stood by the windows overlooking the dark water. Our 2 years were nearly complete. In 1 month, according to our contract, we'd file for divorce. "I owe you everything," Vincent said. "You owe me nothing. We had a deal. The deal's ending." He turned to face me, his hand moving to the scarf at his throat. Then, slowly, he unwound it and let it fall. "Diana, I know what we agreed to. I know you have your own life, your son who's recovering, your teaching. But these months with you, I haven't felt this alive in 2 decades. You make me want to be better, to create music again, to stop hiding." His voice dropped. "I love you. I've probably loved you since you took my hand that night and refused to let me drown in my own guilt. I'd told myself this was business, a transaction. He was my employer, not my partner. But somewhere between the galas and the late conversations and watching him slowly shed his armor, I'd fallen completely. "I love you too," I whispered. "Then stay. Not because of a contract. Stay because you choose to." "What about Jake and Emma? They need you." "They can visit anytime. They can stay here if they want. Diana, I have more space than I know what to do with. I'm not asking you to give up your family. I'm asking to become part of it." I kissed him then. It was awkward and perfect, his hands shaking slightly as they touched my face like I was something precious and fragile. We renewed our vows 8 months later, this time with Jake and Emma there, both crying happy tears. Jake stood as my best man, still using a cane but walking. Philip officiated. It wasn't a contract this time. It was a promise. Jake is 35 now, married to Emma with a baby girl they named Anna, after Vincent's student. Vincent cried when they told us, said it was time that name meant hope instead of loss. Emma's a successful designer working from home. They live in the guest house on the estate, close but independent. Vincent and I are still here, but the house isn't hollow anymore. It's full of music and laughter, and Jake's daughter's toys scattered across expensive rugs. Vincent composes again. Beautiful pieces that sound like healing. He started a foundation scholarship in Anna Kovach's name for young musicians struggling with mental health. He still wears scarves sometimes, but not always, not when we're alone. And me? I teach piano again, but now it's here in our music room, working with Vincent to mentor young composers and musicians. We teach them about balance, about art and health, about knowing when to push and when to hold back. I married a broken man for money and discovered he wasn't broken at all. Neither was I. We were just waiting for someone brave enough to see past the scars. Sometimes the best love stories start as transactions and end as choices. We choose each other every single day.